Welcome to the Impactful Leadership Show. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. John Lennon once said, "A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality." Join me as we connect dreams to reality by chatting with innovators from around Washington, D.C. Our show is proudly sponsored by the D.C. chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization. This is the Impactful Leadership Show. Welcome to the Impactful Leadership Show. My name is Greg McDonough. I'm the CEO of Blackburn Capital Advisors and the chapter president of the Entrepreneurs Organization of Washington, D.C. Today's guest is a best-selling author, trainer, ICF Professional Certified Coach. She's a trusted partner and problem solver. Her company was ranked 526 in the fastest growing private companies and 12th in the education industry by Inc. 5000 in 2021. She is the founder, president of CoachDiversity Institute. Towanna Burrous, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. It's good to see you.
It's amazing to have you on the show today. So today, we love to dive into leadership. And my favorite question to ask my guests is, what are some misconceptions around leadership?
Well, when you ask that question, the first thing that comes to mind is some of the challenges I see with my clients. And that is, in the days that we're living in now, obviously we're in the COVID years, we are not quite in an endemic. But what happened with leaders is they were no longer viewed as like they were employees. The biggest misconception is that a leader is somehow some inanimate object that is not thinking and feeling, but is supposed to assume all the responsibilities and challenges of the employees or the people that they're leading, and that their thoughts, feelings, emotions, stress actually don't matter. So the biggest misconception is that they are, and I only have one in this season because this is what I've been talking about again and again, is that that leaders are employees too. And they require the level of support and care, empathy and structure and vision and discussions from the executive level all the way through to mid-level. They deserve and need that care as well as employees. They cannot be exempt from that. And I think that so many people have gotten caught up in thinking that they're not employees.
That's really insightful. And you mentioned how you've seen that shift in particular across the pandemic. Talk to me a little bit more about how you would have answered that question before the pandemic.
So before the pandemic, I would have said that leaders would sometimes believe that, vulnerability is weakness. That in the space of having to do more with less, that their primary challenge is, again, motivation and encouragement and trying to get employees to, double down and get them engaged. And so it's about the vulnerability and leading with the need to be have more empathy, sharing that you don't have to know it all. So those are pre-pandemic kind of things, the basic traditional leadership challenges that we've seen again and again, decade after decade. But since the pandemic, there's been a significant shift.
Interesting. Talk to our audience in a little bit more detail around, we've got an audience member who's listening to our show, and she is considering taking her leadership journey. She's considering starting her leadership journey. Let's give her some advice, right? Let's pave the way. What would you tell somebody who's looking or considering taking on a leadership role or an entrepreneurial journey? Let's talk to that audience member of give them some advice.
Yeah. So I would say to that future leader or that leader that's working right now, the first thing is that when you are leading other people, when you decided to take on this leadership role, and you applied, and congratulations, you're now the leader in the seat. You decided that I'm going to take on all the different leadership skills and attributes that, I have benefited from. And I'm going to model those because I've had great leaders in the past. And these are the things that I enjoyed about my previous leaders. And I'm going to emulate that. I'm going to role model that. And so we typically walk into those spaces saying, this is how I was led. I liked it. So I'm going to, rinse and repeat. What I would submit for new leaders to do today is to continue to do that, but let's take it up a notch and recognize that now that you are in the seat, in the season that we're in now, the one thing that you need to consider is what you don't have. What skills don't you have? We know that skilling up requires understanding your financial models. Skilling up means understanding, how the operations work and human resources. And so there's a lot of different details that come with leadership that you typically default and say, I really don't know how to do that or a lot about that, but I'm too busy to stop and do something about it or learn it. So I would submit that you consider writing a list of the things that you believe you need to skill up in. And if that would mean working and on your operation side more, then do that. And again, you don't have to be the master of those skills, but you should consider knowing enough so that you can sit at a table and have an exchange, a very strong informational exchange to where you can get smarter at it. But you just need to be able to get started in that subject area. And you don't want to be the one searching and trying to figure it out. So skilling up, it would be something I would say right away. The second thing is increased empathy. We are in a season where the need to be more empathetic is like king, it's primary. So outwardly, you're working with individuals more regarding what their needs are, their unmet needs, what support they need. So increasing that empathy lens and being able to support the people that you lead differently than you have in the past, being sensitive of the challenges that the pandemic has caused, right? So when you're in a season where we have a labor shortage, we have to do more with less, then more responsibility falls on the leader. But at the same time, for those who are on your team, they need more empathy. They need more support as to how to navigate in these changing times. And then third, I would say, while you're focused on those individuals, don't forget about yourselves. The most important part of being a leader is, of course, always being ready to step in and being in your most powerful role. And that would mean for you to have a safe place where you can go when things get tough for you. Where do you go when times are tough? Where do you go when you want to quit? Who do you speak to when you are considering your next opportunity in elevation and promotion? So sometimes we put our heads down and we go through and we are so dedicated to the people we're leading that we forget about ourselves. So please consider, what does retreat look like for you? What does professional development look like for you? And making sure you have at least quarterly touch points, not just biannually, because typically you talk about twice a year, you do some type of touch point regarding your own professional development. I would submit, as a leader, you may want to consider quarterly, what do you need to do to add value to your ultimate goal, like where you envision yourself in the future.
That's really impactful. One of the things I like to do is book just think time on my calendar. And I try to do it once a month, and I block a half a day and I say, all right, just me and a blank piece of paper and a pen and a quiet room. And I try to get some sort of grounding from that experience. I'm curious, what do you do in that self-care, that self-awareness? Because it is a critical component of leadership. It's your self-leadership. And so I'm curious of what tricks and tips that you work on.
Well, to be very direct, once a month, I'm always retreating someplace. So once a month, I find myself at my favorite spa, where I'm actually dedicating a full day of self-care. So I will go to my favorite spot. I will spend a full day. I end my day at 5 o'clock sharp. It's very rare that I have a reason to work after 5. So I start my day as soon as my children, their feet hit the floor, I'm up, of course, but my day for the office starts at 8 a.m. And so I'm working from 8 to 5. I'm taking a lunch all the time at noon. I'm always breaking for lunch. So I have those really strict rules, and I started implementing that about 3 years ago, where I said, these are my non-negotiables. Do not book my lunch hour. That's my time. Do not book anything after 5 o'clock. If there is a reason to work after 5 and any of my team members are, emailing after 5, they get, a nice little talking to. It's like, okay, it was 5 o'clock when that email went out. Tell me why you're working after 5. And it really has to be a good reason, because a lot of times, even during the pandemic, when everyone's virtual and remote, you would end up working more hours and not really realizing how much more time you were putting at the desk because it was so much more convenient. And that was when I really had to be a lot more strict and, bear down and say, hey, absolutely not. If anything, the best thing you could do is probably schedule that email for the next day, even though you may be working that night. Don't schedule that. Don't send it. Just schedule it for the next day, because most people are going to respond if they see the email, and they're going to feel obligated to respond. So very strict rules, Greg. I've been so determined to maintain that health and wellness, because I can't, if I'm not at my best and my team's not at their best, and I have to get all my proper rest. I mean, 6 to 8 hours of sleep is super important to me. And so I must, tuck myself in not too many hours after I've tucked my youngest in. So I am very strict with my time.
That's powerful. And I find that, diving back into email after dinner, when you've been frustrated with your kids not eating their vegetables, like that emotion comes out in your work response. And so by setting those boundaries, I love it. Like it eliminates you not being at your best when responding to certain things when it comes to your work. I'm really curious. You mentioned this, you started this 3 years ago. Was there a catalyst that happened 3 years ago that made you say, wait a second, I need to make some changes or put some limits in?
Yeah, when the company started to grow exponentially, one of the things that I realized that if I don't get a grip on it now, then it will be out of control later. So it was important for me to hurry up and set the standard and train my team in that way, that these are our standards, these are the rules that we are going to live by. And if we do it now, then there's an established cadence for the future. And so that is why we did it, because as soon as I saw the tides turning in the direction of growth, that was my first commitment, to want to take care of yourself. If you are not ready or working and sharp, this whole ship is going to go down. So do it now before you suffer later. And so that was my commitment to myself. And once I did that, and I saw how well it was working for me, and how much my employees enjoyed that as well, because 5 o'clock comes, they're like, Towanna's not online. So no matter what's happening, they can enjoy the rest of their evening as well, But again, there's always an emergency here or there that I'm very much aware of, or our international clients, time zones, make a difference sometimes, and you have to have a later day because of time zones. But that's not a normal thing. It's very rare, and maybe 3 times a year that might happen. So it was my looking into my future and saying, before I get there, what do I need to do now?
So diving just a little bit deeper into that, I'm curious, what other benefits have you seen in your life outside of just the work guidelines from implementing that type of guidelines in your work life?
Yeah, the primary benefit is that I can continue to be a learner. So continuous learning. I'm an educator. I love to learn. And when I am able to shut those hours out, that's my reading time, my quiet time, the time when I consider, visions for the future. So there's time that I spend in the fourth quarter of every year planning for the next year, right? So I spend all of fourth quarter writing down my goals for the next year. But throughout the year, I am considering, what knowledge do I want to obtain? What new thing do I want to know? And that the reading is super important. It's a lot of new material in the marketplace. There's a lot of new research based on what's happened with COVID. So as a researcher, the primary thing that I enjoy doing is learning. So when I'm learning, I am in a zone and I feel amazing, and it feeds me. It's like it's the energy I need, like the sun to grow anything. I need to always learn. And I'm reading, researching, interviewing people casually, even when having a social hour, I'm still learning. And so I stay in that zone. And that's the benefit of having more time back, is because I get to fulfill my need to learn, my need to spend quality time with my family, my need to rest. Those are the three top things that make a difference.
Fantastic. You mentioned your fourth quarter planning for the following year. Do you have a specific process you go through in your planning exercise?
Absolutely. The first thing I do is look at the trends that are that we've noticed throughout the first three quarters. What were some of the client trends? What are some of the challenges that they all have in common? So we look at common themes based on the first three quarters. Then we go and do research in the marketplace regarding where education, or basically in our specialty area, where are we headed based on research? So we'll go out and look at some thought leadership, some peer-reviewed articles that support that theme, and to begin to design new content or to update our existing content based on that new information. And so that's the first thing you do. The second thing we do is to take our strategic plan. So the strat plan is written, the very first strat plan I ever wrote when, back in 2015, it's the same one. It's just evolved year after year. So I get to see the growth. And so I look at all of the measurements. So the strategic plan is a historical as well as a current state and a future state snapshot. So I look at where we've come, where we are, and where we're headed. And so, the other thing is to take the strat plan and add the new year to the strat plan, so that it shows the progression. We celebrate the wins, and we continue to build on the client list. So for instance, these are the clients that we have in this year. Now, which clients do we want in the future? And so it's almost like for some people, they would call it a vision board in a lot of ways, where you're like, this is what I want to attain in the next year. And so I began to get very specific and granular about the type of client. So for instance, if I wanted to start working in the oil industry, I would begin to look at, out of all the companies that are in that space, which ones are most attractive to me based on their efforts in the work that we do.
Fantastic. I love, and I haven't thought about this, so this is new for me, so thank you, of using or having your strategic plan as a history, right? Many of the clients I work with, and even my own strategic planning, you kind of open up the document, you delete all the things from last year that you want to update, you make some updates, you hit save, or you print it, and hopefully you refer to it on an ongoing basis. And it sounds like yours is a living document. It's
a living document. And every year, we just add another column to the spreadsheet of the table that shows the revenue growth. So from 2015 all the way out, and it's not the same as a financial spreadsheet as we look at our costs and savings. It's more so our internal aspiration goals. Like, what is it that we want by category, by line? Like, whether it's student services, corporate services, what do we want to do? And we want to show it before we do financials. Let's just take a whack at what we want here in the future column by celebrating. So what we'll do is update the current column, like the current year column, and say, okay, these are the actual numbers. This is what we wanted, but this is what we did. And we're able to show that and celebrate what happened year after year, and show when we're in that state of prediction, like we're predicting based on trends that we will be able to increase by, 80%. And that's what that revenue would look like. Well, then when we go and talk to the finance team, they'll say, based on our trends, you actually can make that happen. And these are the ways you can do that. And so I like to go at it first before I talk to finance, because like I said, I'm visioning what I want for my company before I hear what other people see. I want to say, this is what I want, because this is my passion. This is my effort for the world. This is how I contribute my thought leadership to the world. It's mine. Let me first say what I want to do with it. And now everyone else tell me, is that possible?
So I'm really curious, as an economist, That was my undergraduate degree.
Uh-huh.
How accurate has your
Oh my
predictions
God,
been?
spot on,
Really?
spot on. Yeah.
Love it.
And it's been fun. Now it's a challenge. Before it was like, I would say, okay, I'm going to, in the earlier years, I'm going to double the revenue. So we're talking about, 100% growth. I'm going to double revenue, keep doing that. So in the first 3 years, like I'm going to double, double, double. And so then you start getting into the bigger numbers, like doubling is not going to make sense right now. So what will make sense? And so then being able to pivot from the double to finding exactly, okay, is it more about doubling or is it more about acquiring the clients that would then with the money, maybe the money will come, but is it more about the client types that you're most interested in? And for me, that's what it's been. It's because I'm very picky about who we work with. And that's because we are a luxury brand. If you look at us and what we do, CoachDiversity is a luxury brand. Everybody can't work with us. Everybody can't afford us. And so with that being said, we are extremely picky on who we work with, and you have to be ready to work with us. Not because you have to have the right budget, but more, are you culturally ready for the work that we do? Are you situationally prepared? And so we do this interview. They interview us, we interview them, and by the end of the meeting, they say, "Okay, Towanna, are we your type?" And I'll say yes or no.
When I follow businesses and work with clients, it's always amazing when I see them shift from measuring revenue to measuring impact, right? And so to your point, at some point in time, you can't just keep doubling, right? That's mathematically impossible. I guess it is possible, but anyway, the sky's the limit, I guess. But at some point, the reality sets in and you really start worrying about or focusing on what's my impact of the work that I do with my community, with my employees. It's fascinating. You touched on that. So let's take a different angle, Towanna. I'd love to know and hear about your childhood, how you got into this profession, where the inspiration for your business came from. Like, let's talk about you for a little bit.
Right. So my professional background is I'm a chemist and mathematician. So my undergrad work as a scientist I went and started working in the federal government space. And after several decades, I transitioned from federal government because I wanted corporate experience. And so I then left federal and went into corporate spaces, did another couple decades in corporate. And while I was there, I noticed my passion for people increasing, professional development. So when you're in technology, it's just all about the products that you're designing. It's about the science, it's about the research in the labs, etc. But then you started to groom other talent so that you are designing these amazing teams to be more innovative and creative. And so now you're nurturing the talent to stay in this space of competitive space for design. When I turned on that part of my brain to focus on people and mentoring and sponsoring employees, finding untapped talent in the organization, finding people that were brilliant, but they didn't know how to sell themselves, people who had gifts that hadn't been explored before. I became extremely fascinated with how do I elevate this person to a place of visibility so that they can do the work that I believe that they can do to shine and to really help us with our programs. And that was the beginning of it. And so for me, it was once I started putting together this incredible team of people and creating products that were always at the, as far as top most requested products or services, I knew I had a science behind it. And so I then started studying professional development. Traditional leadership was one thing, but I wanted to study how do you really nurture talent. And so that became a quest of mine. And so when I was in the corporate space, I had gotten to a point where I couldn't be managed anymore. I had gotten to the top of the food chain and I didn't want to spend any more time on the road traveling. 60% of my time was on the road. My oldest child was in middle school and I was gone so much that I was like, okay, there's got to be a point where you say, I've done as much as I'm willing to do for someone else. I think it's time for me to stay focused on something that I want now. And I decided that it was a perfect opportunity to, one, relocate. So I left corporate, relocated to Hawaii for 2 years, changed everything because I was stressed. I was overwhelmed. I was traveling a lot. And I said, I'm going to homeschool my daughter. We're going to live in Hawaii. I detoxed from the hustle and bustle of the East Coast. And while I was there, all the stars aligned, and I discovered coaching. And I found about coaching accidentally, but I knew that I was going to launch my own company. I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I knew those things were going to happen while I was away in Hawaii. It's just that, what I was going to do to be different than others that were out there. Like, what would be my secret sauce? When I discovered coaching, I nailed it. I knew that was like, this is the skill that's missing from all the things that I'm doing that I believe is going to make a difference in the work that we do. And so I integrated coaching into my management consulting firm, still working in the technical spaces in science and engineering. And all my clients began to understand the power of coaching, executive coaching, career coaching, all those types of things. And they began to see the value in it. And then we combined that with a lot of different curriculum, workshops and training and education. And then the rest is history, because after that, I then realized that we needed to diversify a bit more. So within the coaching space, it's a very, it lacks diversity and very plain, very basic. So there wasn't enough variety of coaching approaches. And so I knew that my clients were asking for a very particular type of support. And so diversity meant finding people that were differently abled, people that had different languages, people that were ethnically and gender different. And that became my new mission. Okay, so by building my consultancy, I need to diversify by making sure I'm hiring the diversity that is a reflection of the employees that are within these organizations. And then that was the beginning of it all. And we have done some fantastic work working with almost every industry. I mean, it's amazing watching people embrace our curriculum and watch the work that we do and the way we change the world.
It's fantastic.
Thanks.
So let's talk about your coaching business and the ideal, if there is such a thing. Talk to me about what a typical client, what they're seeking. Somebody's listening to our podcast today and they're considering taking on a coach for whatever aspect of their life. And for me, right, I've got coaches in my life for many different things, right? So I've got a triathlon coach, I've got my life coach, I've got my swimming coach, I've got a golf coach, like all these things. And you can't just have one coach for everything. I've learned the hard way. Talk to us about your clientele, who gets attracted to what you're offering.
Yeah. So we have 3 primary services. One, we certify professionals in the coaching skill set, and we are the only training institute in the coaching space that combines diversity, equity, inclusion, education, and coaching together. So we are teaching professionals how to coach across diverse lines so that you're able to support employees that are different from you. And believe it or not, you would think that when I'm working with someone, I'm just helping them goal set or something like that. Well, everyone approaches the world differently and they have different experiences, and the way they experience the world must be respected and honored and understood. And so we teach people how to coach across diverse lines. So certification is one. The second one we do is one-on-one coaching, like you described. I work with you, Greg. You're my executive client, and we work on, your goals regarding your professional development or something that's going on in your office. Companies hire us to provide a bench of coaches. So they'll say, Towanna, we are wanting you to provide coaching services to 150 executives. And so we would then provide them a roster of coaches for them to choose from, and then those relationships will get started. And then the last thing we do is customized training, where people would say, in the space of diversity and inclusion, we want to learn more about microaggressions. We need to learn more about psychological safety. We want to know more about how to lead inclusively. So they will then hire us to come in to help them design their diversity plans and their learning journey as it pertains to creating opportunities for people to become more inclusive, creating a shifting culture from one state to another, to where people feel more seen, heard, respected, and valued. And so we design unique training, we do assessments, and we do a lot of work internally with that company to see, like, where's your current state, and then let's design action to get you to where you really want to be. And so in those three areas, the clients that come to us, a lot of them are in the helping profession. So they're educators, they're lawyers, they are therapists and counselors. And then they're also leaders who are leading an organization and saying, I have a very diverse team, but I feel like as a leader, I'm not doing my best for them. And so they come to us for them to level up their leadership to be more inclusive. And the best part of our work is that nationally and internationally, so it doesn't matter even if it's a global company, even our global companies are all still having the same challenge, right? So the best way to describe it is, again, if you are a leader who has a diverse team that you're leading, and you wonder if you are able to engage that employee are you disconnected or connected with them? What does performance look like? Do you need to improve, but you don't know how to connect because they're different from you? And difference, we typically frame difference in the level 1, which is everything I see that's different: gender, race, ethnicity. What's under that, though, is level 2 diversity. So I'm working with a person a single parent who is also caring for her elderly parents. So you have these familiar structures, and then you have the culture, and you have education. So there's so many things that I create identities that are way below surface, and that impacts how you show up in the world. So my stress comes in because I'm a single mom. I have to run my household. I have to leave the office at a certain time, but my leader needs me to be there, and they don't understand the complexities of my level 2 diversity. That's what I'm talking about. It's connecting those dots. And people who are ready to fix those challenges so they can get the best out of their people, to be more inclusive, to stay competitive in this global marketplace. What we call it is mid 21st century leadership. And that requires you to identify what the gaps are in your leadership that's keeping you from being able to connect and to those individuals that are really driving your company.
That level 2 analysis is fantastic. And I feel the pandemic has opened a little bit of that window, right? There's been so many phone calls, so many Zoom calls that my kids have Zoom bombed me. I'm on with a client, and next thing you know, they're behind the scenes talking to whoever I'm talking to. So it's made that brought the family life into work life.
Yes.
And I love the fact that you're focused on that, right? Because it is a huge part of what we bring to our work life every day, right? However, my kids ate breakfast in the morning, if that was a good experience or a bad experience, will dictate how I kick off my day at 8:30, right?
Yes. And if I were working with you and I wasn't aware of how your home life is, sometimes, not all times, in some type of chaotic spin, how you show up at the office, I can take it personal. It's like, what's going on with you, Greg? Why, your mood's different. It has nothing to do with me. But if I don't talk to you about that, then I would assume there's a problem between us. And there's no problem between us at all. It's just that you have your mind someplace else, and how you're showing up is causing me to perceive something that's not accurate. And so that is level 2 diversity.
That's powerful. Mm-hmm. So shifting gears a little bit, one of our audience members is looking to connect with you. What's your preferred social media connect point? LinkedIn, Facebook, email?
Our clients find us on LinkedIn primarily. So LinkedIn is my primary go-to. So if anyone wants to connect, you can definitely find me, Towanna Burrous, on LinkedIn. Too easy to do that. Yeah, I love LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's addictive. And we'll have your social media links in our show notes. So anyone who's trying to write that down quickly, just scroll down at the end of the show and you'll see all our show notes. So Towanna, one last question. I see a ton of books behind you. You've talked about your reading process, your learning process. Your all-time favorite impactful book?
All-time favorite? That is not fair, Greg.
You can make a list of 3 if
You
that's
know,
okay. If that's
I
easy.
can't, I have to be honest with you. I can't say I have an all-time favorite. I can tell you that right now, what I am reading that has really been enlightening is a book called Cast. And actually it's right here on my shelf, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's right here. This book has been quite enlightening about the origins of our discontent. The origins of our discontent here in the United States. And it's been very enlightening. It is a New York Times bestseller. Again, so Cast is very interesting. It's a historical view. It's also one of Oprah's book club. So it's so popular that a lot of book clubs and a lot of best lists are putting Cast there. But it's very interesting about the history of the United States and where we are and what got us to where we are today, which is the work that I do. And understanding that historical context in the classroom brings so much value to a leader when you're helping them to try to understand unresolved issues that some of your employees may have that are keeping them in a state of mind that they really don't feel seen, heard, respected, or valued. And that history lends a lot of into that. So that's what I'm doing now.
Fantastic. Well, put that in my Amazon cart shortly. I'm going to squeeze in one more question.
Sure.
What about the future gets you excited?
Oh my gosh, what about the future gets me excited? Well, in my work, I believe that I am touching the future generation of work, the workforce, our future workforce. I get to work in K-12. I get to work with higher education. So I am able to work with the professors as well as the classroom instructors for high school who are touching students every day. And my ability to give them these skills that they need to show what mid 21st century leadership is about as they are educating, instructing the next generation. That is so exciting for me. I know the power of the work that we do. I see it in evidence and the research, and all the data reports shows us that the work that we're doing is changing lives and changing the way people are behaving. And I really am excited about the opportunity that my oldest daughter gets to go into an office, and she uses her skills so that she's able to, because she's an officer in the Army. So she gets to use her skills to lead as a 21st century leader. My son, who's in middle school, helping him to process and think through perceptions and understanding, especially middle school years, the weird years, right? So I'm really excited about how the coaching skill is helping leaders to connect better with our workforce, our future workforce.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, those fun middle school years. Anyway, we could have a whole new show just on that topic.
Absolutely.
Well, Towanna, it's been amazing having you on our show today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
And that's a wrap, my friends. Thank you for spending your time with me. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at impactfulleadershipshow.com. One last food for thought. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone.